Hello, and welcome to Module 3 of the Get Unstuck program.
Hi, Jess. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Thank you for being here. Before we get started with today's content, let's have a look at last week's module. Let's do a quick recap. So we discussed cross-addiction and the ways in which we subconsciously switch to new habits in order to correct old habits. We learned that switching habits doesn't solve the problem. It only leads to more avoidance. We determined that we would get to the bottom of what is driving our habits. We learned about the importance of cleaning up the past and came to understand that we have to make amends in order to feel better and to make progress. We also discussed that we have to do the work of digging through the past so that we can uncover and acknowledge all the repressed memories that we hold shame and guilt or regret towards. We acknowledged that this is going to be a challenging process. It is definitely normal for lots of feelings to come up at this time. We're starting to dig through things, and it's going to be a difficult, challenging process, but you have all the support you need. Please know that you can reach out at any time. We are here for you. We learned about the importance of having the right mindset to work through the challenges. We're digging this stuff up because it is what is required for getting unstuck. And we're willing to do whatever it takes to get unstuck. We came to understand that what we're doing here is mending fences and reestablishing connections. This is going to help us get unstuck. We also talked about building a foundation and having faith in the healing process. So today's class, we are going to review 3 topics again, starting with 1, learning how to become the competent adult you always needed. 2, how to set boundaries. And 3, how to embrace your inherent value. Randy, how can we move from the negative space that we've been working through in these past 2 modules towards more positive things?
The reason we're switching here, and it's so important to switch here, is we've been really into the heavy stuff, and we're starting in that way. However, we want you to know that the way this program's going to work is we're going to be weaving in the positive along with cleaning up the past and dealing with some of the things from the past that are distressful or painful or shameful or whatever. And so this is the beginning of that focus where we're going to be looking for and the qualities that we always needed when we were growing up. Had the adults had these qualities, then we could have been gradually internalized. The kindness, thoughtfulness, somebody cares, they want to hold me, reassure me, comfort me. And somebody cares about my thoughts, somebody cares about my feelings. It doesn't mean I run the show, it just means that I can get guidance and direction. Because sometimes that's the most important part of having an adult in your life, is having somebody that can give you guidance and direction, say, no, that's not okay, or yes, this will be good. And be done not in a cruel way, but in a guidance way, in a learning way. Because that's the purpose of it, is to be able to allow ourselves to develop these qualities, take these qualities in, and then they become part of us, and then that's who we think we are. Instead, what we ended up with, if you're here, is probably some shame and guilt and a lot of put downs and things that ended up affecting you so that you see yourself in a negative light. And that's what we're wanting to take the layers off of, because they're not true. They just happen to be impressions along the way that we were given, primarily by the people who were supposed to take care of us, but didn't have what they have available to them, what we needed. So they could have passed it on. This is not about blaming. This is about just, how do you pass something on if you don't have it? And many of our families that we came from didn't have what we really needed, didn't have what your parents needed, didn't have what your grandparents needed to be able to feel good about themselves and to be comfortable in their own skin. So this competent adult, what would it look like? And this is for you to be doing some brainstorming, which you're going to develop this more. But would a competent adult look like somebody who listens? Would it be somebody who actually pays attention? What about would be somebody that could give you feedback in a clear way, but not in an abusive way? Would it be somebody that had patience? but it's somebody that had sometimes some firmness and sometimes some flexibility. What are these things? And though, there's no perfect competent adult out there, but what we're looking at is what are the qualities that you'd like to start focusing on as we start to develop. If we're not the negative person, we're not that person that we internalized and thought was us, and then went around and looked at the world and found ways to reinforce that idea. If we're going to do that differently, we need to be able to put our attention on it and then look at what are the habits of this kind of person. So what would a kind person, how would they behave? Are they more comfortable? Are they quieter? Are they more peaceful? Are they loud, screaming, yelling? What are they like? So we're moving in this direction so that we can become the people we always need in our lives. We will be the adult that we need. It's not out there. It's not over there. It's not over there. It's not over there. It's not going to ever work. People can have qualities that you're looking for, but if you're looking for somebody to give you the kind of complete internalization that you would have gotten as a child, because you don't have any other impressions. The little kids are taking it in, they don't have any impressions, so that it's easy to be able to absorb. Whether it's good or bad isn't the issue. So anyway, we're going to be focusing on what would a competent adult look like. So just see if you can imagine some of these qualities that we're talking about. And if we were going to have you be the person you always needed in your life, just start to think. It's usually what you ask for from other people. I want you to listen to me. I'd like to feel like I matter with you. I'd like to feel like you care about me. I'd like to have appreciation. Those kinds of qualities are many times what people look for in relationships. And inevitably, you don't end up being satisfied trying to get it out there now because it's never good enough and it can't be found out there. It's nice to have that kind of energy around us supporting us, but we can't expect somebody else to make up for something we didn't get. Because that happens, and then you're always frustrated that the person's not doing it right. And the problem is there's no way to do it right. The only thing you can do is learn how to develop those qualities within you so that you have somebody with you all the time who has the qualities that you're looking for. So when you think about somebody out there, what are those qualities you'd like? Make sure you're practicing them so that you then are saying, this matters to me, this matters to me, this matters to me. Do I treat myself as if I matter to me? Do I neglect myself? Do I get enough rest? Do I eat poorly? Do I get exercise? Am I around people that reinforce and support me or people that drain me and suck the energy out of me? What are the people like? So this competent adult is like, it's not a perfectionistic thing at all. It's just about moving in a direction of more competency, of more capability, of more functionality, so that life is easier. I don't do so many things that are bad ideas, then I don't have to clean them all up. So we're going back to cleaning the past. We want to do that, but we want to also work towards and continue on, and we will do more of this. Moving into the today, what can I do today? Is there something I can clean up today? Is there a habit I can be practicing? Is my partner or somebody, my kids, somebody else, is there somebody I need to be patient with? Because I would have liked that patience. What am I going to do to be able to become a more patient person? We're going to get lots of things down that road. But right now, we're creating this competent adult so that we are the person that we always needed in our life.
One of the things I love that you say is you can't be alone if you're with yourself, right? So you're alone if you're out there looking for somebody to fix you. You can be alone with yourself, though, right?
Yes. Yes. And then you get to have that sense of loneliness doesn't exist because I'm home. What happens is I can be alone with myself at home, saying this is my consciousness with my body. I can be alone with me and be perfectly happy, and I can be with other people and share me with others. But I'm not out there looking for somebody to complete me, to fill me, to take in the things that I don't have. And so, because that's a futile exercise and it's common as it can be.
Thank you. That's super helpful, Randy. How about topic number 2 now? Let's dive into how to set boundaries. Can you tell us why it's so important to set boundaries?
Yes, we've been talking about, I was just talking about this idea of how to develop this competent adult so that you can be the person you always. And in that process, thinking of these new habits of maybe kindness or patience or whatever it might be, that may not be a strong suit for you right now. So when we're having this intention of wanting to start to create new habits and letting go of some old ones, then we need some way to protect that, because it's so easy when I'm attempting to do something new and then it's something comes along, somebody has an attitude with me or some old habit starts to get created again, and I start to get frustrated because I feel like I have no way to kind of protect these new qualities. It's like having a garden where you planted a bunch of seeds of things you want to grow, but then you don't have any way to protect it. So maybe it gets stomped on or walked all over or run all over or driven all over. And it makes it really hard for those qualities to come up because I don't have any way to protect them. So this boundary concept is there for our protection. And it's also there to help us contain ourselves. So, but the part we're focusing on this at the moment is this idea that I need to have some kind of protective force field, energy field, a jar, bowl, container, something or other that I can put around me so that this qualities that I'm wanting to practice and develop and feel comfortable with, I have some way to not get caught up in what everybody else is thinking. Because one of the challenges is that so many of us, when we're trying to figure out an environment, we're trying to figure out what's safe and when it's going to be safe to go do something, and maybe we could talk to mom or dad, or maybe not. And so hypervigilance becomes one of the traits. It's really common for kids that have ended up taking on a lot of shame. So because of hypervigilance, we spend time watching what everybody else is doing and what we think other people are feeling, and we want, what are they thinking about us? And consequently, we're not with us. We're out there trying to find out what is the right way to behave so that we're safe, and or how am I going to get what I need or want, and how, if I'm going to have to manipulate people to get it, I need to be able to read them so I can know, is my message getting through or not? Am I, So all of this energy that gets spent on getting other people, worrying about what other people are thinking, we're starting to close that down, because if we don't, we'll start to change some habits, and somebody outside might say, "What are you doing? You're not like that. That's fake. That's a phony. You're a phony." Or they don't want to see these new qualities. Maybe you're starting to have boundaries to say, "Hey, I don't want to do that today. I'd rather not. Thank you anyway." Or, "I don't deserve to be treated this way or talked to this way." So, and that's not necessarily going to make anybody happy. So, usually when we're making these changes, some of the folks who depend on us to take on the shame, to take on some of the issues in the family or the dynamics and relationships as being the problem one, then when you start to move out of that, then other people start going, "Wait a minute, I want you to play this role for me. I want you to suck up all my feelings. I want you to carry all my pain and sadness. I want you to be the one that gets to be frightened all the time. So I'm going to scream and yell at you and do all these things." And you say, "That's not okay. I don't deserve to be treated this way. I don't deserve to be talked to this way." And so they're going to react. So we want to make sure these boundaries are such that regardless of what somebody else does or doesn't do, we continue down this path of this creation and development of the person we always needed. So the boundaries are critical. So imagine being able to have this force field around you. So if you would, on your own, just kind of think about that for a moment. And then we're going to have an internal boundary system, which is like extra protection. So it's like a bulletproof vest or suit of armor, flak jacket, something that'll be up against the skin, but it's close. So, And we have a little doorway over the heart, so we can always open and share from the heart. We can always receive in the heart. But we have the doorway, just like, if it's stormy weather, it's nice to have a window you can close or a window you can open when it's really nice out and you want to take in more of what's happening around you. So the boundary system is critical. It's one of the things that I learned, because what would happen is somebody would be walled off. So there's two major ways that these boundaries work. One of them is you start out with no boundaries. So as a little kid, you have no boundaries. You're not supposed to have boundaries. You're supposed to take in and absorb what's going on around you. So you do. So start out this way. However, if you get traumatized a lot, or you don't really, when you start to say, hey, I want to do some things differently, and that's not allowed, then what can happen is you can really get traumatized in these early stages of life. And you'll find that there's a lot of people that are classified immature or self-centered or whatever. It's because they got early developmental traumas that happened at a developmental stage when you were supposed to be self-centered. And so now, because you got traumatized there, your emotional development didn't evolve into somebody who's got a lot more freedom and flexibility, so that you could think about yourself, but you could also just as easily be thinking about others, because we start to recognize that this is an interplay and interpersonal dynamics are, where we get most of our satisfaction in our activities with each other. And so no boundaries. So then people go to walls, and walls are there, they're safe. You can have a wall of anger. You can have a wall of sadness. You can have a wall of talking. You can have a wall of silence. You can have numerous kinds of. You can have a self-righteous wall. You can be better than everybody else. Be smarter than everybody else. You can actually have even a wall of pleasant. When I used to go to London, I used to see this a lot, where I would see these people who are being so pleasant. And at the same time, I had this impression that they were really frustrated or angry or something inside. But the wall of pleasant was up. So you had no idea what was going on with them, because they were very pleasant. So anyway, there's lots of ways to have these walls. So when I work with people, I say, okay, let's start to take down the walls, because you're lonely and you're isolated and you're not maturing. You can't develop and mature in a wall. You have to be engaged. You have to interact. You have to have this dynamic tension going on where things are happening. So here we are. We're going from the no boundaries to walls. And then I help people get out behind their walls. And inevitably, the thing that would push their buttons the most, they would go find that kind of person and pick them. And so that would reinforce their original belief that it's not safe to be out in the world without walls. And then I go back to my walls again. And they say, well, you tricked me. And so on. And at that point, that early on, I didn't know about boundaries. So this is why it was so valuable. So here we are. We're going to create a semi-permeable system, which allows us to take in what we need. So there's plenty of air, the interactions we can have with other people. We get to choose. Do I want to take this in? Does this seem like this fits for me about what's being said to me or about me? Is it okay? Because I've got a boundary, I can filter it. Well, wait a minute. I don't think I did anything to deserve that. Okay, then let's keep it out. Let's just let it bounce off. Let's let it make it Teflon if you want. Let it slide away. However, if it's something I think, I've heard this from 5 other people I care about, maybe it's something I need to take in. So this idea of the boundaries allows us to continue to grow, to mature, to develop. We're not just only going to take in what we want to hear. We can sometimes take in things that seem like maybe they have some validity. Let me think about it. Let me spend some time saying, well, maybe that's got some validity. And so maybe I'll just look at that as an issue that maybe I'm in denial of. So anyway, this boundary system is there to help us have interactions, to be able to be safe, and also be able to contain ourselves. If you were raised in an environment where there's a lot of yelling, screaming, boundary violations of all kinds, then you are going to probably have some of those qualities as well. And you don't, because you never learned about boundaries, how would you know what a boundary was? And how would you know what other people's boundaries are? So, if you're a person who invades other people's space all the time, it probably came because you came from an invasive space that you grew up in. And you're going to need to practice containment. Be able to say, hey, Randy, that's not okay. To myself, you need to stop. This is not right, because I can see that people are checking out on the other side of my relationship with them, or they're hazing over, or whatever it might be. And I know that we're not connecting anymore. So the idea here is to be able to have connections with other people, be able to protect our sense of competency so we can share that with others, feel like we've got something worth sharing because we're cleaning up the past, and be able to get some familiarity with this. And this is the skill. If we've been raised with it, easy. If we're not raised with it, which is probably why you're here, because we use drugs, alcohol, and so on, if we don't have the boundaries, we're going to numb, avoid, distract, run away from, because those are the only choices that we had when we were growing up, or when we came along the way that it seemed like they work. Alcohol works. It numbs. It makes you feel less pain sometimes. It's a painkiller. So, all right. So here we go. We got the competent adult developing, and we got this protection developing around us. These are all skills that require repetition and practice. But the beautiful thing is that as you develop these habits and you work with them and create them over time, they start to become natural for you. They start to become easy for you. And as long as you're taking good care of yourself, you can maintain the energy that's required to be able to be present. If you burn yourself out, you don't feed yourself well, you don't get enough rest. You burn yourself out in different ways. You drink too much, that defeats the boundary. Think about this. If you happen to be a drinker, you were out drinking, and people are starting to all get drunk, what happens is nobody has any boundaries. People are grabbing each other, they're knocking into each other, they have there's no consideration, because you don't really feel it unless it hits you. Then you go, oh, okay, maybe I should have been a little more cautious. Anyway, so the boundary evolution and the competent adult, these are all movements in a direction, but also cleaning up the past is a movement in a direction. You can't do it all at once. This is the thing that most people in the category that we're working with here are people who have very little patience, and very little patience with themselves, or doing something new, or patience with other people. So patience will be one of the skills, one of the patterns you have to do. And another one is people happen to they get pretty black and white, which means perfectionism. And if we're in perfectionism, then we're always mentally abusing ourselves, because we'll always be a failure. If you have to be perfect to be okay, then you will always be a failure. So perfectionism is emotional and mental abuse for yourself, or anybody you project it onto.
I have one question for you on that, and it pertains to using our imagination. So we're imagining boundaries, right? It's all in our head. How is something that's in our head like that so effective in protecting us?
Okay, that's really a good question. Because it's the things that we take from other people. So somebody gives me a look, and I imagine that they are mad at me. I imagine that they are saying bad things about me. I'm imagining they don't like me. I might be accurate, but it's still an imagining, because I don't know for sure. I'm just imagining it. But I react to what I imagine. If I think somebody else likes me, then I react to and I imagine, oh, they really like me. So this means a whole bunch of things, and I'll make up stories about it. And then I'll react to the stories. Some people, kind of the love addict folks, will meet somebody, and the next thing they know, they're already imagined getting married and having 5 kids. So that's all imagined. But we react to what we imagine, because the bodies will actually react to what's inside this mind, this interpretation of what's out here, not what's out here. It'll react to how we interpret what's out there. So this is all imagining at one level. This is about our perception and interpretation. So we're just saying to ourselves, we can imagine that we could be safe. We just never could imagine that before. We can imagine that these things could bounce off, and what other people think about me is none of my business. What I think about me is my business, and be conscious of how I am treating myself mentally. As many people, and you may be included, are meaner to themselves, more abusive to themselves than any relationship in their life. And I found so many folks that got into abusive relationships, and then it looked like the abuse was only coming from the outside. So they said, oh, if I only got rid of that person, then I wouldn't feel abused anymore. Many times that abusive system is right in here. You get rid of everybody else in your life. You sit there and you mentally abuse yourself with nobody around. And you go, oh my gosh, I guess I don't need anybody to abuse me. And I pick relationships so they abuse me because I deserve to be abused. And I can't get away from them because I deserve to be abused because I'm worth, not a good person. And then if I get rid of them, then I've still got me. And that's why I want me to be the competent adult that treats me well. That says, hey, you're a good guy. Why don't you treat yourself well? Yes, you make mistakes. Yes, you do silly things. So what? Everybody does. Anybody that thinks they don't is really making a mistake. Because it's ridiculous. We get to make mistakes. That's part of growing and developing. If we're not making any mistakes, we're not doing anything new. If we're not doing something that we're uncomfortable with or feels unnatural, we're not doing anything new. So people say, oh, this is phony. This doesn't feel like me. Well, yeah, but it can be the habits and the patterns and the individual interacting in the world that you'd like to be. It just isn't familiar to you. Doesn't mean it's not you. It just means that it's not the habit patterns that you're used to. Those can change. That's what we learned about plasticity of the brain and how habits work. And habits are neural pathways, and they get created, they get established, and then we think that they're us, and we just do them unconsciously until we say, wait a minute, I don't want to be like that anymore. I'm going to create some habits over here and say, oh, I listen to people. I might even get interested in you and wonder how you are. Maybe I could actually have some empathy for another human being, but it has to be developed if you weren't raised with it. So anyway, so those are the qualities that I see, and it is all imagined at one level. This is not physical abuse. This is not physical stuff I'm talking about. This is mental and emotional and spiritual abuse that comes.
Perfect. Thank you for explaining that in such great detail. Let's move on to this last part. This last lesson is on inherent value. So Randy, can you help us to understand really what does it mean to embrace our inherent value?
Yes, this is really a sweet aspect of what we're learning and we're developing. And this is that if you look at small children, maybe babies, maybe infants, maybe you've had your own children, or maybe you've been around children. Maybe you like children, maybe you don't like children, but let's assume that most people, when they see a child, that they can notice that they have value just the way they are. Their smile, their curiosity, their innocence, their wonder, and their excitement, and the joy that they have, that they express. Those qualities are natural for us as human beings. They're our natural state, and they represent our inherent nature that's connected to the life force or the source of all life. And in that source, there is these qualities of abundance and beauty. And then life starts to happen. And this could actually go all the way back into the womb. It can always go back to, right after conception, actually. If you have somebody who not want you, or your mother was depressed, or this was an affair, or this one more child that you don't need. So this may be hard for some people to understand, but I just know that based on my experience and the research that's coming out now, that every cell has an intelligence. and it communicates with all the billions and billions of other cells all the time. There's an inherent intelligence that's happening. So these cells will pick up what's going on around them. So first, the closest obviously is the mother. What the mother's running through her body, what the mother is feeling about herself, and what she's feeling about you as part of her life. And the environment around you. Does dad want you? Are there other people that are involved here that don't want you to be pregnant? Or maybe they do. However, when that happens, all that gets taken in. And that subtlety makes some of the earliest impressions. And so if your mother immediately did not wish you to be on the planet, then you're going to feel like there's something inherently wrong with me from the moment I was conceived. And people will have shame binds that are around the fact that they even exist. And those kinds of folks will go out of their way to try to placate and make everybody happy because they don't want to take up any space, because they don't feel like they deserve it, because the impression was, I'm not supposed to be here. So anyway, we go back here. So we have, this can be an impression. But the truth is, at the point of conception, every time I've run across this, people find some kind of white light, warmth of love, some sense of inherent value at the moment they were conceived. The life force comes in, and then all these little cells start to develop, and they start to double and triple, and they go into this thing where you start to have a nose, and you start to have ears, and a mouth, and a heart, and lungs, and all these things start to grow. All of that's inside that seed. The first egg that got together with the sperm, boom. So it evolves from there. So that's the nature of, because you have a life, because you've been given a life, gives you value. What you do with that life is up to you and what you learn along the way. But what we're thinking now is because I'm going to accept the fact that I had inherent value. I can see it in other little children sometimes. Sometimes I can actually see it in other people. But the point is, it's there and you can't prove it. So if you're going out of your way to prove your value, if you only had a PhD, if you only had millions of dollars, if you only had the right relationship, if you only had the right house, whatever it is, right job, then I would be valuable. If I only got a Pulitzer Prize, then I'd have value. If I only got the most important award that ever was given in mankind, then I'd be okay. And I can tell you, none of that will ever, ever, ever get internalized if you don't believe it's already true. I can only take in value if I believe I have value. So this inherent value is critical for us. And because it got so covered up with shame or feelings of maybe nobody wanted to touch me, nobody had time for me, or they wanted to beat me up, and if I cried, they smacked me around, or they didn't, whatever the things that might have happened along the way that I interpreted as being about me and being bad and being ashamed of myself or being guilty or what a bad person I have people sometimes when they say, well, I got beaten all the time, but I deserved it. And I say, no child deserves to be beaten. They deserve to get guidance and direction. And because the adults sometimes don't have that feeling about themselves, they don't pass it on. So we're going to inherent value, and it's because it's this essence of who we really are. And it was really hard to wrap my head around this. It took a long time for me to get clear on this. And in fact, I'd do affirmations and I'd argue with my affirmations and say, well, you don't really deserve that. So just know that this is not a really easy thing to do. This requires, again, with this whole program, a willingness to do things that don't make any sense, maybe seem phony, seem fake, seem whatever you want to call it. And I can just tell you that the repetition and then the action that comes with it. So I can't just say I have value and then treat myself horribly or talk to myself horribly, because then I won't ever really get to take it in. I can say I have value, and then I act like I have value by being kind to myself, or making sure I get enough rest, or making sure that I have proper food in my body, or I'm around people who appreciate me, that don't just drain me and take from me, or that I don't have to placate and take care of them. That I actually treat myself as if I matter as well. So the mattering and inherent value, they all get tied together. Because if I don't feel like I have this inherent value that was just given to me with this life, then I will constantly be trying to overcome that with finding ways to make myself super. And so many people will have fantasies of grandiose ideas because they're coming from such a low self-esteem. They think only the impossible could make me have value. I can remember when I used to pick the hardest things I could find so that if I could accomplish those, and if somebody said it's impossible, I got excited because then you can prove something. If you could, anybody can do it, why bother? It doesn't prove anything. I can't I can't have value. And I thought value was being better than. The value is being able to have what I have to be valuable. I'm not going to be valuable someday. I am valuable. And that I just need to behave and act as if that's the truth. And that just requires repetition and confronting so many layers that we're letting go of from some of the things we're cleaning up, these impressions that no, we're not worthy, we aren't good enough, we aren't smart enough, we aren't beautiful enough, not the right body. All of this stuff that we make up that say that we aren't worthwhile, or that there's something flawed in us that's that's what you can't overcome, then that's not true. So thinking about how if you had this boundary around you and you got this competent adult inside this boundary and you see a small child and you think about maybe see that person or that child being held or loved and being treated as precious. And if you could imagine yourself as that infant and be able to come to that place where this little being is you, and you wrap it all up in a nice little blanket, and you keep it nice and warm, and you put it on your chest, you open that little doorway over your heart, and you just feel warmth and love towards this little being who is you. Begins to let yourself develop pathways of self-love and caring, which isn't egotistical. It's not self-centered. It actually is the nicest thing you can do for other people is to take good care of yourself. Treating yourself well, that means to take care of you because you're taking care of yourself, but you can have people be a part of that, but you don't have to. And because I take good care of myself, I share with you what I've got. I can't share with you the good stuff unless I feel like I've got it. And you're treating myself as if that's the truth. Again, we're back to imagining, but we're creating new neural pathways, new belief systems, and as we unravel and let go of some, we're adding new ones in that reinforce this sense of competency, this sense of capability, this whole movement away from something that I've got to have something to numb me, fix me, make me okay, to wait a minute, I'm okay as I am, and there's always more I can do. That's an interesting paradox, and this program is full of paradoxes because everything that has a spiritual orientation is always paradoxical. It's always, at any given moment, one or the other might be the truth or the right answer. So just knowing that this inherent value has to be taken in, it's critical that we have a foundation of inherent value. Because otherwise we get into this relative world of comparisons. And as soon as we get into comparisons, then you're better than, or I've this, and you can always find somebody who's better at something than you are, or somebody that's worse than you. And depending on how you then build your own sense of self, then many people have to put other people down to have value. or they need to be around other people to put them down so they can be reinforced that they're not any good or they deserve to be punished. So inherent value, critical, and it's going to become something that it's going to be clearer and clearer how this evolves for you as we get rid of more stuff and focus on more of what we want to do to nourish ourselves. So
That makes so much sense. I have to admit, this was probably one of the big shifts in perspective for me while doing this type of work. Being able to picture a small, beautiful, innocent, laughing, giggling child and thinking this child has done nothing to earn their keep or to earn, their what they deserve. They're just so innocent and beautiful inherently, right? They have everything that they need from the get-go, and then we're out in the world and everything unravels from there. So being able to picture my own inner child, being able to look at my baby photos and see pictures of myself as this beautiful little baby who had all this value, it really helped me to believe, wait a minute, I have all that value. I've just been through all sorts of stuff that has given me a worldview or that's made me think a certain way. And it really helped to realize that I have that inherent value already.
yes, because we get the false impressions and we think they're the truth. So now we're getting back to the truth, which is inherent value.
So well put, Randy. Thank you. So now we've made it to the end. Let's summarize what we went through today in Module 3. So we learned that we have everything it takes to become the competent adults we have always needed in our lives. We started using the power of imagination to envision what qualities we previously wanted and needed, but didn't have access to. We learned that we are already competent adults now. We just don't believe it yet. Many of us see ourselves as flawed and inept, which makes us stay stuck in negative patterns. We were introduced to the concept of setting boundaries so we can protect and maintain our energy. We learned how to use our boundaries to recognize and filter out other people's energy and to stop ourselves from giving away our energy. We came to understand that we lack boundaries mostly because they were never provided or demonstrated to us as children. We discussed cellular consciousness and learned that we have been given the gift of life, which gives every single one of us inherent value from the moment of conception. We also reviewed the ways in which we attempt to prove our value and came to understand that this is impossible and unnecessary because we already have value and therefore we don't need to earn it. Okay, so this week's homework has 3 parts. The first part, you're going to list the inherent values that matter to you. So what positive qualities do you want and need from others? The work you do here will help you to build character for the competent adult that you are becoming. The second part is to think about examples of poor boundaries. Now, this can be boundaries that were broken by you, or it can be other people who have broken your boundaries. Think of any examples of bad boundaries so that you can come to the group call prepared to discuss and do some activities with these types of boundary breaking examples. And the third part is going to be listening to your thoughts. So from now until the group call or forever, maybe, let's think about the thoughts, the negative statements that we beat ourselves up with, right? So any negative statements that you tell yourself about yourself, make note of these. How have you been beating yourself up? What messages are you believing about yourself? That is the homework for Module 3. Please come prepared to the group call with the homework answers ready to go. You have your worksheet to fill things out. This week's group call for Module 3 will consist of quite a few visualization activities. So we ask you to please come prepared with the homework done so that you have stuff in mind that you can share with the group. And just come prepared knowing that we're going to practice setting up boundaries. We are going to do a visualization activity that has to do with picturing who this competent adult is that you're conjuring up in your mind. And we're going to ask you to interact in your imagination with someone difficult who doesn't respect your boundaries, and then we'll play out a different scenario that works better for you. So that's it for module 3. Thank you so much again and again for showing up. You're here, you made it. This is hard work, but we are here for you and you're doing amazing. Honestly, if you've made it this far, you're doing the work. Thank you. We'll see you soon.